Ladies and gentlemen, it's that time again.
It's time for the J. Craig 5, maybe 10-minute movie review.
Vice is directed by Adam MaKay, the same guy who brought you The Big Short a few years ago, also brought you Anchorman, which is one of my favorite comedies of all time. This movie stars Christian Bale as Dick Cheney, who this movie's about, the vice president under George W. Bush, who's played by Sam Rockwell. You have Amy Adams, you have Steve Carell, you have Tyler Perry. You have a real onslaught of really good talent in this movie. And it's no surprise because The Big Short got a lot of acclaim. You had, Adam MaKay. Now everyone wants to work with him. So that's fine. And that's great because now you have some really good talent altogether. And everyone's really good in this movie. Now this story is about Dick Cheney. It is part comedy, part docudrama, part biopic. It's a great mixture of each, and it's not either one of the other. If it's any one of the other, it's probably the docudrama part, because this is more historical based. And so this is telling the story of Dick Cheney and his rise in power, very unassumingly, and the way he quietly wielded and obtained immense power during the Bush era, second Bush era, anyways. So this is a really almost uncomfortable kind of comedy where it's a comedy, but it's not out loud laughing most of the time. You know, it's more subtle humor, dry humor, very under the surface kind of humor, because it's a little gut churning from time to time on what transpired and how things worked out and the way things work in politics. It's maddening. Now, going into this movie, I didn't know what to expect because I'm not a Big Short fan. I didn't like the movie all that much. So when I think of Adam MaKay, I think more Anchorman. Now, I knew it wasn't going to be Anchorman because this is a historical piece, so how are you going to make that into a slapstick comedy without it being just a parody? I was very surprised by the balance it struck with the comedy, the biopic, and the docudrama part of it. And so this is my second time doing the review because I misrepresented the first time. I've been thinking about it and piecing things together, and actually it's actually a really good screenplay too. It's a good story. So the problem I had at first was I thought it was kind of confused. Like the first half of the movie is more docudrama, little bits of humor, more docudrama. It's more about the backstory of where he came from, where he got to the point where the rest of the story takes place, right? It's about him getting to this point, the backstory. And it felt a little off to me. I was like, okay, this is not a comedy. It's a little funny from time to time, but it wasn't striking the right chord with me. Now, once the credits roll, that's where the story takes life for me. And I say that in jest, but you'll know what I mean when you see it. And it was one of my favorite parts of the movie, and I thought it was genius. And then the story found its feet, for me anyways. It finds its feet because that's when George W. Bush gets involved, and the story seems to blossom from that point on. Now, I look back at that first half of the movie, and I think it's confused. I think it doesn't know what kind of story it's telling, and it's a little off. But then as I think about the scenes and their selection, it makes a lot of sense. For instance, the opening scene is Dick Cheney, a younger man, getting pulled over, falling down drunk out of his car. He's going to get arrested. The next scene is fast forwarding to the day of the 9/11 attacks, and it's Dick Cheney being rushed through the White House into the bunker. And I thought, why are they drawing those two parallels there? Like, where's the connection? And as I started thinking about the movie, I was like, oh, well, it makes perfect sense. It's only natural. You're starting the story off with two very pivotal moments in this man's life. The one moment where it was, his wife gave him the decision where it's either you change your stock right now, or I'm gone. I'm not putting up with this anymore. And he didn't want to lose his wife, so that moment changed him for the rest of his life. And then the next point that changed everything was the 9/11 attacks. And so that, when you look at it, yeah, two great moments that really changed who he was, and then of course changed, the landscape of America. So it makes perfect sense now that I think about it. So it's really well done. So the first part might be a little drier, but it's doing a really good job of getting the story ready for you for when Sam Rockwell and George Bush get involved. Boom, the story takes off, and all of a sudden this movie makes makes a lot more sense. It doesn't make a lot more sense, but it really kind of comes into its own. So a very interesting movie, very interesting story, kind of a scary story if you look at it in a certain way. And there's a very good crowd-pleasing moment towards the end. I won't spoil it for you, but it was nice to hear the crowd applause at that particular moment. And of course, the cast is amazing. George W. Bush, Sam Rockwell's George W. Bush, is so perfect because it's not hammy. It's a really good rendition of Bush. And Dick Cheney, I mean, you're looking at Christian Bale. You can't even see Christian Bale. You can see his mouth. He's got a unique mouth, like teeth, right? You can see Christian Bale there in a certain way, but it's Dick Cheney. Amy Adams, what a great job they did of making her not look like the Amy Adams that I'm in love with. So she's fantastic in the movie. She strikes that balance to get him in line. And then you have people like, Tyler Perry as Colin Powell. Looks fantastic. He's not in it as much, but he's good in what he does. And then Steve Carell, I'm sure Donald Rumsfeld. That's a great addition, or I should say a great representation of that guy too. So very, very good movie. I highly recommend it now because especially this time of year, you're having the second wave of the big blockbusters for the year, and you have Bumblebee, you have Aquaman. During Christmas, why not go see this movie? It's definitely going to be a lower totem pole kind of thing there, right? Not so big budget. So go see it. I hope you enjoy it. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and see you next time.